Can you imagine being so desperate that your only option is to move into an abandoned train car in the middle of the mountains with 3 hungry children? It seems like a story from a nightmare, but this happened in the interior of Brazil in 1902, in the early days of railway construction through the Serra da Mantiqueira. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and leave your like, because what this widow discovered inside that abandoned train will leave you speechless. A secret that had been hidden for years, waiting for the right person to find it. And tell me in the comments what city you're watching this story from. I'd love to know how far these emotional stories are reaching. Adelaide Santos was 33 years old when the world collapsed around her for the second time in her life. The first time had been when she was 19 and her parents died in a yellow fever epidemic that devastated the region of Campos do Jordão. The second time was on a gray autumn morning in 1902, when she received news that her husband, Roberto, had died in a railway construction accident. Roberto was a railway engineer, one of the men responsible for designing the ambitious project to connect São Paulo to Minas Gerais through the mountains. It was dangerous work. Everyone knew that. The terrain was treacherous, the cliffs were steep, and accidents were frequent. But Roberto was careful, experienced, respected by his colleagues. Until the day a poorly secured cable snapped during the installation of a bridge. Roberto and 2 other workers fell 50 meters into a ravine. When they found the bodies, 3 days later, Adelaide was already a widow with 3 children to raise and no source of income. Adelaide was a woman of uncommon beauty, even marked by hardship. She had wavy black hair that fell to the middle of her back, usually tied in a practical braid. Her eyes were a deep green, an unusual inheritance from a Portuguese grandmother. Her face was oval with high cheekbones and full lips that rarely smiled anymore. She was of medium height, with a slim but strong figure, hardened by years of hard work. She wore simple dresses of cotton fabric, always clean despite being worn and patched in several places. Her 3 children were her entire world. Tomás, the oldest, had just turned 12. He was a serious boy, with his father's brown eyes and a sense of responsibility beyond his years. He already worked doing odd jobs, carrying bags at the train station, helping at the market, anything to bring a few coins home. Then came Laura, 9 years old, a girl of striking intelligence with Adelaide's green eyes and an insatiable curiosity about everything. She loved books, even though she only had 2, a catechism and an old storybook she'd found in the trash and carefully repaired. And finally there was little Pedro, only 5 years old, a boy full of energy who still didn't fully understand that his father would never come back. He kept asking when Papai would return from work, and every time Adelaide had to explain again that he wouldn't return, a piece of her heart broke. They lived in a small rented house on the outskirts of Pindamonhangaba, a town that had grown rapidly with railway construction. It was a simple place. 2 tiny rooms, a kitchen barely bigger than a closet, and an outhouse in the back. But it was home. Or at least it had been while Roberto was alive and could pay the rent. The landlord, Senor Geraldo, was a fat man with a red face and small eyes that always seemed to be calculating how much he could extract from his tenants. He appeared at Adelaide's door exactly 1 week after Roberto's funeral. "Dona Adelaide," he said, not even bothering to remove his hat. "My condolences for your loss. But business is business. The rent is due. 3 months overdue, actually. Your husband was already behind before he died." Adelaide felt her stomach sink. 3 months. But Roberto said he'd paid. "Well, he didn't." Geraldo cut her off impatiently. "And now I need my money. 30 mil reis. By the end of the week or you're out." "Senor Geraldo, please," Adelaide begged, hating how her voice trembled. "I just lost my husband. I have 3 children. I need time to find work too." "That's not my problem," he interrupted again. "I have other people interested in this house. People who can pay. End of the week, Dona Adelaide. I won't repeat it." And he left, leaving Adelaide standing in the doorway, feeling the weight of the world crushing her shoulders. 30 mil reis. It was a fortune. Adelaide had exactly 2 mil reis and 50 centavos. Everything Roberto had in his pockets when he died, minus what she'd already spent on the funeral and food. She spent the next days desperately searching for work. She went to every house in the wealthier neighborhoods, offering to wash clothes, cook, clean, anything. But everywhere she went, the answer was the same. They already had help, or they couldn't afford another employee, or they looked at her with suspicious eyes, wondering what a woman alone with 3 children really wanted. She went to the railway company, hoping they might offer some compensation for Roberto's death, some help for his widow and children. The administrator, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and a perpetually irritated expression, barely looked up from his papers. "Company policy, Dona Adelaide," he said in a bored voice. "We pay workers for the days they work. Your husband is no longer working, so there's no payment. We don't offer pensions for widows. If we did, we'd be bankrupt. Accidents happen all the time in this type of construction." "But my husband died working for you," Adelaide almost shouted, her desperation overcoming her usual restraint. "He gave his life for this railway." "And we're very sorry for that," the man said, still without looking at her. "But there's nothing we can do. Good day, Dona Adelaide." She was escorted out by a security guard. On the morning of the 7th day, Signor Giraldo appeared with 2 large men and a cart. Adelaide had tried to gather what little she owned: some clothes, a few pots, the children's books, a photograph of Roberto on their wedding day. But when she saw the landlord's hard face, she knew he wouldn't give her more time. "Time's up," was all he said. The men entered the house and began throwing Adelaide's belongings onto the street. Tomas tried to protest, putting himself between the men and his mother, but Adelaide pulled him back, afraid they'd hurt him. In 15 minutes, everything Adelaide owned was piled on the dusty street. Passers-by stopped to watch, some with pity in their eyes, others with morbid curiosity, but no one offered help. No one dared contradict Signor Giraldo. "Where will we go, Mommy?" Laura asked, her voice small and scared. Adelaide looked at her 3 children, at the pile of their possessions, at the closed door of what had been their home. She had no answer. For the first time in her life, she truly had no idea what to do. Adelaide spent that first night under the eaves of a closed store, her 3 children huddled against her, trying to stay warm. It was autumn, and the mountain nights were cold. Pedro cried from hunger and cold. Laura tried to be brave, but her body shook with silent sobs. Tomas sat with his jaw clenched, his young face trying to show a strength he didn't feel. When dawn broke, Adelaide knew they couldn't stay in town. Signor Giraldo had made it clear she wasn't welcome, and the curious and pitying looks of neighbors were unbearable. Besides, she'd heard that police sometimes arrested vagrants and took their children to orphanages. The thought of losing her children was worse than any physical suffering. She remembered something Roberto had mentioned months before he died. He'd talked about the railway construction reaching the higher parts of the Serra da Mantiqueira, about how some train cars and equipment had been abandoned there when a section of the project was suspended due to lack of funds. Abandoned train cars in the middle of the mountains. Not ideal, but better than the street. "Come on, children," she said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "We're going on a journey." "Where, Mommy?" Pedro asked, rubbing his eyes. "To a safe place," Adelaide replied. "A place where we can rest and think about what to do next." The walk to the mountains was brutal. Adelaide could only carry so much: a bundle of clothes, a pot, a blanket, the precious photograph of Roberto. Tomas carried another bundle, and Laura helped little Pedro walk. They had to leave behind most of their possessions, including furniture that had belonged to Adelaide's parents. The path was steep and treacherous. It followed an old trail that railway workers had used during initial construction. In some places, the trail was so narrow that they had to walk single file, with a cliff dropping away on one side. Adelaide held Pedro's hand so tightly her knuckles turned white. They walked for hours. The children were hungry. Adelaide had only been able to buy a little bread and cheese with the few coins she had left, and that was already gone. Their feet hurt. Laura had blisters that bled through her worn shoes. But they kept going because they had no choice. Finally, as the sun began to set, painting the mountains in shades of gold and purple, they saw it. There, on a stretch of tracks that led nowhere, sat an old train car. It had clearly been abandoned. Rust covered the wheels, vegetation grew around the base, one of the doors hung crooked on broken hinges. But it had walls and a roof, and after a day of walking with nowhere to go, it looked like salvation. "Is that where we're going, Mommy?" Laura asked, her voice a mixture of hope and apprehension. "Yes, my love," Adelaide said. "That's our new home." Getting into the train car was harder than Adelaide expected. The door that still had hinges was stuck, swollen with moisture and rust. It took Tomas and Adelaide working together, pushing and pulling, before it finally gave way with a screech of metal that echoed through the mountains. The interior was dark and smelled of rust, mold, and something else. Something old and forgotten. As Adelaide's eyes adjusted to the dim light coming through the broken windows, she could make out the space. It had been a cargo car, probably used to transport equipment during railway construction. It was about 10 meters long and 3 meters wide. The wooden floor was rotten in some places, exposing the metal beneath. There were old crates scattered around, some broken, others still intact. Spider webs hung from every corner like ghostly curtains. Dirt and dead leaves covered everything. But there was a roof, mostly intact except for a few holes. There were walls that would block the wind. And most importantly, there was nobody to throw them out. "It's perfect," Adelaide said, trying to sound enthusiastic. The children looked at her skeptically, but they were too tired to protest. That first night in the train car was one of the hardest of Adelaide's life. They had no food left. They had only one thin blanket to share among the 4 of them. The wind howled through the broken windows and holes in the roof. Strange noises came from the surrounding forest, the howl of some animal, the rustling of leaves. Sounds Adelaide couldn't identify and didn't want to imagine. Pedro cried himself to sleep from hunger. Laura huddled against her mother, shivering despite the blanket. Tomas sat in a corner, his face hard, trying not to let anyone see him wipe away tears. Adelaide lay awake all night, listening to her children breathe, wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake. Had she brought them here to die slowly in this metal coffin on the mountain? But when dawn came, filtering weak light through the dirty windows, Adelaide made a decision. They would survive. She wouldn't let her children die. She would make this work somehow. The first order of business was making the train car livable. Adelaide organized the children into a work crew. Tomas was sent to find firewood and explore the area for a water source. Laura was tasked with sweeping out the debris and dead leaves. Even little Pedro helped, picking up small sticks and piling them where his mother directed. Adelaide herself worked on the broken crates. Some contained nothing but rotted cloth and rusted tools, but in others she found usable items. A few intact boards they could use to patch the floor, some rope that was still strong, a tarp that could cover one of the broken windows. By the time the sun was high, they'd made progress. The train car still looked miserable, but it was cleaner. The pile of firewood Tomas had collected sat ready near the door. And Tomas had found something precious. A small stream about 10 minutes walk from the train car, with clear, cold water. But they still had no food. Adelaide's stomach cramped with hunger, and she knew her children were suffering worse. She had to find something, anything to eat. "Tomas," she said, "stay here with your brother and sister. I'm going to walk back toward town and see if I can find work, or beg for food if I have to. I'll be back before dark." "I should go with you, Mommy," Tomas said. "It's not safe for you alone." "I need you here to protect Laura and Pedro," Adelaide said firmly. "You're the man of the family now. Can you do that for me?" Tomas straightened his shoulders, trying to look older than his 12 years. "Yes, Mommy. I can do it." Adelaide hugged each of her children, then began the long walk back down the mountain. Adelaide spent the day going from farm to farm on the outskirts of Pindamonhangaba, begging for work or food. Most people turned her away. Some gave her a piece of bread or some fruit, which she accepted gratefully, saving every bite for her children. By late afternoon, exhausted and with a small bundle of food that wouldn't last more than a day, she began the climb back up the mountain. She arrived at the train car just as the sun was setting. But something was wrong. She could hear raised voices, Tomas's voice, angry and protective, and another voice, deeper, older, unfamiliar. Adelaide's heart raced. She ran the last stretch, dropping her bundle, ready to fight whoever was threatening her children. When she burst into the train car, she found Tomas standing protectively in front of Laura and Pedro, holding a large stick like a weapon. And in front of him stood an old man. He was ancient, probably in his 70s or even 80s, with skin like weathered leather and hair that was completely white and hung past his shoulders. He was incredibly thin, almost skeletal, dressed in rags that might once have been railway workers' clothes. His eyes were a startling blue, bright with intelligence despite his age. And most surprisingly, he was smiling. "Mommy!" Pedro shouted, running to Adelaide. "There's a ghost man." "I'm not a ghost, little one," the old man said, and his voice was surprisingly gentle, though rough from disuse. "Though I suppose I might look like one. My apologies for frightening you." "Who are you?" Adelaide demanded, putting herself between the stranger and her children. "What do you want?" "My name is Francisco Almeida," the old man said, "and I suppose you could say this train car is my home. Or it was until you arrived. I've been living here for, well, quite some time." Adelaide stared at him in shock. "You've been living here? In this abandoned train car? For 3 years?" Francisco confirmed. "Ever since I was injured in a railway accident and left for dead. I crawled here to recover and I just never left. The railway company thinks I'm dead, and I prefer to keep it that way." Adelaide's mind raced. This complicated everything. "I'm sorry, senor. We didn't know anyone was here. We're desperate. We have nowhere else to go. My husband died, we were evicted, I have 3 children." "I know," Francisco interrupted gently. "I heard you arrive yesterday. I've been watching from the forest, trying to decide what to do. You're not the first people to seek shelter here, but you're the first who've stayed." "Are you going to make us leave?" Laura asked, her voice small and scared. Francisco looked at the little girl, then at the thin, desperate faces of all 3 children, then at Adelaide's exhausted expression. His weathered face softened. "No, child," he said quietly. "I'm not going to make you leave. There's room enough for all of us in this old metal box. Besides," he added with a slight smile, "I could use the company. It gets lonely talking to yourself for 3 years." Adelaide felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you, senor. Thank you so much. We won't be any trouble, I promise. As soon as I can find work, as soon as—" "Hush now," Francisco said. "We'll figure things out. For tonight, let's just focus on getting through. I have some supplies hidden in the forest. Not much, but enough to make a thin soup. The children need food." And with that, Francisco limped out of the train car. Adelaide noticed he dragged his left leg, probably an injury from the accident he'd mentioned, and disappeared into the forest. He returned 20 minutes later with a small sack containing potatoes, some dried beans, and surprisingly, a piece of salted meat. Working together with Adelaide, they made a fire in a cleared area outside the train car and cooked a simple but hot meal. As the children ate hungrily, Adelaide sat across the fire from Francisco, studying him. "Why are you really helping us?" she asked quietly. "You don't know us. You don't owe us anything." Francisco was quiet for a long moment, staring into the flames. Then he said, "Because 20 years ago, when I was a young man and lost everything, a stranger helped me. Gave me food, gave me work, gave me a chance to rebuild my life. I never forgot that kindness. And I swore that if I ever had the chance, I'd pass it along." He looked up at Adelaide, his blue eyes reflecting the firelight. "Besides," he added, "I've been alone with my ghosts for too long. Maybe it's time to let the living back in." That night, they all slept in the train car, Adelaide and her children on one side, Francisco on the other, with a respectful distance between them. For the first time since Roberto's death, Adelaide slept deeply, dreamlessly, her children warm and fed beside her. The days that followed established a strange but workable routine. Francisco, despite his age and injury, proved to be invaluable. He knew the mountains, knew which plants were edible and which were poisonous, knew where to set snares for rabbits, knew how to read the weather signs. He showed Tomas how to fish in the streams using handmade traps. He taught Laura which berries and roots were safe to eat. He even made little Pedro laugh, carving small animals out of wood with a knife he kept sharp as a razor. Adelaide spent her days trying to make the train car more livable and searching for any kind of work. She walked down to the outskirts of town several times a week, taking in washing, doing odd jobs, earning just enough to buy a little flour, some beans, occasionally some coffee or sugar. It wasn't much. They were often hungry, but they were surviving. One evening, about 2 weeks after they'd arrived, Francisco approached Adelaide. The children were already asleep, exhausted from a day of playing in the forest. The old man had been unusually quiet all day, as if wrestling with some decision. Adelaide, he said. He'd started calling her by her first name after the first few days, at her insistence. "There's something I need to show you. Something I've never shown anyone." Adelaide looked up from the shirt she was mending by firelight. "What is it?" "Come with me," Francisco said. "Bring a lantern." Curious and slightly apprehensive, Adelaide followed Francisco into the train car. He led her to the far end, to a section they'd been using for storage. He moved aside some old crates, revealing a section of the wall that looked slightly different from the rest. "When this train car was abandoned," Francisco said, his voice low, "I explored every inch of it. I was looking for anything useful, anything that could help me survive. And I found this." He pressed on a panel in the wall, and to Adelaide's amazement, it swung inward. It had been a hidden compartment, perfectly concealed unless you knew exactly where to look. Francisco reached inside and pulled out a metal box, about the size of a large book. It was locked, but the lock was old and corroded. "I've been carrying this secret for 3 years, Francisco said. "Never had the courage to open it, never had a reason to. But now..." He looked at Adelaide meaningfully. "Now I think it's time." He took a rock and smashed the weakened lock. It broke on the second blow. Inside the box was a bundle of papers wrapped in oilcloth, surprisingly well preserved. Francisco carefully unwrapped them, and Adelaide leaned close to see by the lantern light. The first document was a letter, dated 1899, written in a neat flowing hand. "To whoever finds this, my name is Carlos Mendez. I am chief engineer for the São Paulo Minas Gerais Railway Company. If you're reading this, it means I am dead, and the corruption I discovered has likely killed me. I have evidence, documents, ledgers, signed contracts, that company directors have been embezzling millions of reais from the construction budget. They've been using inferior materials, falsifying safety reports, and causing the deaths of dozens of workers through their negligence. I intended to bring this evidence to the authorities in São Paulo, but I received threats. They know I know. They'll try to stop me. So I've hidden this evidence here, in this train car, on a section of track that's being decommissioned. If something happens to me, perhaps someday someone will find this and bring these criminals to justice. The main document you need is the ledger. It shows every fraudulent payment, every bribe, every life that was sacrificed for profit. May God have mercy on all of us. Carlos Mendez. March 15th, 1899. Adelaide's hands shook as she finished reading. She looked at Francisco, her eyes wide. "Do you understand what this means?" Francisco asked, his voice hoarse with emotion. "This evidence could bring down the people who've been stealing from the railway, who've been causing accidents through their greed. People like the ones responsible for the accident that injured me. The accident that killed your husband." Adelaide felt something cold and hot simultaneously rush through her body. "Roberto," she whispered. "The accident that killed Roberto. It wasn't just bad luck. It was because of this. Because they used cheap materials, skipped safety procedures, all to steal money." "Probably," Francisco said grimly. "This company has been corrupt from the top down for years. Workers have died, been maimed, lost everything, while directors got rich." Adelaide's mind was racing. "We have to take this to the authorities. We have to." "It's not that simple," Francisco interrupted. "The company is powerful. They have connections in São Paulo, probably in Rio de Janeiro too. If we go to the local police, the company will hear about it before we even finish giving our statement. They'll destroy the evidence, and probably silence us too." Then what do we do? Adelaide asked, frustration and anger mixing in her voice. Francisco was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "We need to get this evidence to someone who can't be bought. Someone beyond the company's reach. I know of a man, an honest judge in Sao Paulo, Judge Marcelo Tavares. He's known for his integrity. If we can get these documents to him personally, he'll act on them." "Sao Paulo is days away by train," Adelaide said. "Weeks on foot. How would we even get there?" "We use their own railway," Francisco said with a grim smile. "We sneak onto a cargo train heading to Sao Paulo. I used to work for the company. I know the schedules, the routes where the guards are lax. It's risky, but it's possible." Adelaide looked at the documents in her hands, then at her sleeping children. This evidence could destroy the people who'd killed Roberto, who'd left her and her children destitute. But it would also put them all in danger. "I need time to think about this," she said finally. "Of course," Francisco agreed. "It's a big decision. Take all the time you need." But as Adelaide lay down that night beside her children, she already knew what her answer would be. Roberto deserved justice. All the dead workers deserved justice. And if she could help make that happen, she would. No matter the risk. Over the next days, Adelaide and Francisco carefully planned their mission. They studied the documents thoroughly, memorizing the key information in case anything happened to the physical evidence. Francisco drew maps showing the layout of the Pindamonhangaba railway station, marking guard posts, schedule changes, the best places to board a cargo train unnoticed. The biggest challenge was the children. Adelaide couldn't leave them alone, but bringing them on such a dangerous journey seemed reckless. Francisco offered a solution. "There's a woman who lives about an hour's walk from here," he said. "Dona Carmela. She's old, probably even older than me, but she's kind. She lives in a small cabin, makes her living selling herbs and remedies. I've traded with her occasionally over the years. She's one of the few people who knows I'm alive. She'd take care of the children for a few days." Adelaide was hesitant to leave her children with a stranger, but she had little choice. She walked to Dona Carmela's cabin with Francisco, and the moment she met the old woman, she felt her fears ease. Dona Carmela was tiny, barely reaching Adelaide's shoulder, with a face like a wrinkled apple and eyes that sparkled with warmth and intelligence. She listened to Adelaide's carefully edited story. They didn't mention the documents, only that Adelaide needed to travel to Sao Paulo for a few days to try to claim compensation for her husband's death, and immediately agreed to help. "Bring the little ones to me," she said in a voice surprisingly strong for her age. "I raised 7 children of my own. God rest their souls. 3 more for a few days will be no trouble at all. I'll keep them safe and fed." 2 days later, Adelaide made the heart-wrenching walk to Dona Carmela's cabin with her children. Tomas, who understood more than he let on, pulled her aside before she left. "This is about Papai, isn't it?" he asked quietly. "About what happened to him?" Adelaide looked at her son, so young, but already bearing the weight of being the man of the family. She couldn't lie to him. "Yes," she said. "I'm going to try to make sure the people responsible answer for what they did." Tomas nodded seriously. "Be careful, Mommy. We need you." "I'll be careful," Adelaide promised. "Take care of your brother and sister. I'll be back soon." Leaving her children was one of the hardest things Adelaide had ever done. But as she and Francisco made their way back to the train car to prepare for their journey, she felt a sense of purpose she hadn't felt since Roberto's death. She was going to fight back. She was going to make them pay. Boarding the cargo train was easier than Adelaide expected, which only made her more nervous. If it was this easy, surely guards would catch them eventually. Francisco led her to a specific cargo car that he said would be carrying machinery parts to Sao Paulo. "They rarely check these during the journey," he explained. "Too much trouble to move all the equipment. We can hide among the crates." They waited until after midnight, when the platform was nearly deserted. Francisco, despite his age and injured leg, moved with surprising stealth. Adelaide followed his lead, keeping low, staying in the shadows. They slipped into the cargo car just as the train's whistle sounded. Minutes later, with a lurch and a screech of metal, they were moving. The journey to Sao Paulo took 2 days. 2 days of hiding among wooden crates, of snatching moments of sleep in uncomfortable positions, of going hungry because they'd brought limited food and water. The train stopped several times, and each time Adelaide's heart raced, terrified that someone would check their car. But no one did. Francisco proved to be an invaluable companion. He kept Adelaide's spirits up with stories from his youth, when he'd been a young railway worker with dreams of building something great. He'd been idealistic then, he said, believing that the railway would bring prosperity to everyone. When did you realize the company was corrupt? Adelaide asked during one of the long stretches when the train rattled through the countryside. Francisco was quiet for a moment. There were signs all along, he said finally. Corners cut, safety complaints ignored, workers who raised concerns suddenly let go. But I didn't want to see it. I needed the job too badly. And then came the accident that nearly killed me. He touched his injured leg unconsciously. A bridge collapsed during inspection. It should have been able to support the weight. The plan said it would. But the builders had used inferior materials, pocketed the difference. 3 workers died that day. I only survived because I fell into water instead of onto rocks. And the company? Adelaide asked, though she already knew the answer. Called it an unfortunate accident. Worker error. Paid a pittance to the families and moved on. Francisco's voice was bitter. I was in the water for hours before anyone found me. When they did, they assumed I'd die from my injuries. They didn't even bother checking on me at the hospital. Just marked me as deceased in their records. When I recovered enough to walk, I found I'd been replaced, declared dead, erased. I didn't have the strength or resources to fight them. So I disappeared, became a ghost. Adelaide reached over and squeezed his hand. You're getting a second chance now. We both are. On the second night, as the train approached Sao Paulo's outskirts, they prepared to disembark. Francisco had timed it perfectly. They'd jump off at a point where the train slowed to navigate a curve, before it reached the main station where guards would be plentiful. Ready? Francisco asked as the train began to slow. Adelaide clutched the leather satchel containing the documents. Ready. They jumped, rolling as they hit the ground. Adelaide scraped her hands and knees, but nothing was broken. Francisco grunted in pain as he landed on his bad leg, but he waved off Adelaide's concern. I'm fine, he said gruffly. Come on. We need to get to the judge's house before dawn. Finding Judge Marcelo Tavares's residence was easier than gaining audience with him. The judge lived in a substantial house in a respectable neighborhood of Sao Paulo, and the household staff were trained to turn away unexpected visitors, especially ones who looked as disheveled as Adelaide and Francisco after 2 days hiding in a cargo car. But Adelaide refused to be turned away. When the butler tried to close the door, she put her foot in the way. Please, she said, her voice desperate but firm. Tell the judge that I have evidence of corruption in the railway company. Evidence of fraud and manslaughter. Tell him that workers have died because of this corruption, including my husband. Tell him that if he doesn't see me, these deaths will continue. The butler, taken aback by her intensity, hesitated. Wait here, he finally said. 10 minutes later, Adelaide and Francisco were shown into Judge Tavares's study. The judge was a man in his 50s, with iron-gray hair and sharp, intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. He was dressed in a silk robe, obviously having been roused from sleep, but his expression was alert and curious. You have 5 minutes, he said without preamble. Convince me that I should pay attention to 2 strangers who appear at my door at dawn with wild accusations. Adelaide placed the leather satchel on his desk. My name is Adelaide Santos. My husband, Roberto Santos, was a railway engineer who died in an accident caused by inferior materials and negligent safety standards. This man is Francisco Almeida, a railway worker who was left for dead after a similar accident. And in this satchel is evidence of systematic corruption in the Sao Paulo Minas Gerais Railway Company. Evidence that was hidden by an engineer named Carlos Mendez before he was killed to silence him. Judge Tavares's expression had changed from skeptical to intensely interested. He opened the satchel and began examining the documents. The 5 minutes stretched to 10, then 20, then an hour. The judge read every page, his face growing darker with each revelation. Finally, he looked up. If this is authentic, and I have ways of verifying that, then this is one of the most extensive fraud cases I've ever seen. Millions of RIS embezzled. Safety regulations systematically violated. And you say an engineer was killed over this. Carlos Mendez, Francisco confirmed. He disappeared in 1899, shortly after writing that letter. The company said he'd abandoned his position and fled the country. But I worked with him. He wasn't the type to run. He was going to expose them and they stopped him. Judge Tavares stood and began pacing, his legal mind clearly working through the implications. This will require a full investigation, he said. I'll need to coordinate with federal authorities. The company has powerful connections, but with evidence this damning, even they can't escape justice. However, he looked seriously at Adelaide and Francisco. You both need to understand the danger you're in. If the company learns you're behind this exposure, they'll come after you. They already took everything from me, Adelaide said quietly. My husband, my home, my security. What more can they take? All I have left is my children and my dignity. And I won't let my husband's death be meaningless. I won't let them keep killing people for profit. Judge Tavares studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. You're a brave woman, Senora Santos. Braver than many men I know. I give you my word. I will pursue this case with every legal power at my disposal. And I'll ensure that you and your family are protected. And the compensation? Adelaide asked, hating that she had to bring up something so mercenary when they were talking about justice. But she had 3 children to feed. Will there be any compensation for the families of workers who died? If we can prove the company's negligence directly caused these deaths, and with this evidence we can, then yes, the judge said. There will be compensation. Substantial compensation. What followed was one of the biggest corruption scandals in Brazilian railway history. Judge Tavares moved quickly, coordinating with federal investigators, seizing company records before they could be destroyed, arresting directors before they could flee. The evidence from the hidden train car, combined with the company's own poorly concealed records, painted a damning picture. For 7 years, company directors had systematically stolen from construction budgets. They'd bribed inspectors, falsified safety reports, used materials that barely met minimum standards while charging the government for premium materials. And workers had paid the price. The investigation uncovered that at least 47 deaths over those 7 years could be directly attributed to the company's negligence. Roberto Santos was one of them. The trials took months. Adelaide was called to testify, along with Francisco and dozens of other workers or their families. She stood in the courtroom, looked the company directors in their eyes, and told them exactly what their greed had cost her. My husband was a good man, she said, her voice clear and strong despite her trembling hands. He was honest, hard-working, and dedicated to his profession. He believed in the railway, believed he was building something that would help people. And you killed him. You killed him as surely as if you'd pushed him off that bridge yourself. You killed him for money, for your mansions and your fancy clothes and your expensive dinners. And you would have kept killing if you hadn't been stopped. The lead director, a fat man with a red face named Gustavo Pires, tried to interrupt, to defend himself, but the judge silenced him. The verdicts, when they came, were severe. The main directors received prison sentences ranging from 10 to 20 years. The company was fined millions of RIS, and was ordered to pay substantial compensation to the families of workers who died due to their negligence. Adelaide's compensation was more money than she'd seen in her entire life. Enough to buy a house, to ensure her children's education, to live comfortably for years. But more important than the money was the sense of justice. Roberto's death hadn't been meaningless. His name was listed among the victims, officially recognized. And because Adelaide and Francisco had found the courage to come forward, dozens of other families also received justice. Adelaide used part of her compensation to buy a modest but comfortable house in Pindamonhangaba. Ironically, just a few streets away from where Senor Geraldo, her former landlord, lived. The look on his face when he saw her moving into a house twice as nice as any he owned was immensely satisfying. But she didn't buy the house for satisfaction or revenge. She bought it because it had 4 bedrooms. One for her, one for Tomas, one for Laura and Pedro to share, and one for Francisco. The old man had protested, saying he didn't want to be a burden, but Adelaide wouldn't hear of it. "You saved my life," she told him firmly. "You saved my children's lives. You helped me bring my husband's killers to justice. You're family now, Francisco. And family doesn't abandon each other." Francisco, who hadn't had a family in decades, who'd lived as a ghost for 3 years, finally broke down and cried. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for giving me back my life." The abandoned train car in the mountains remained, gradually being reclaimed by the forest. But before they left it, Adelaide and Francisco placed a marker there, a simple cross carved with the name Carlos Mendez, the engineer whose hidden evidence had changed everything. "Rest in peace," Adelaide whispered. "Your courage wasn't wasted. Justice was served." Tomas grew up to become a lawyer, inspired by Judge Tavares and determined to fight for workers' rights. Laura became a teacher, ensuring that children like herself, even those from poor families, had access to education. Pedro, the youngest, retained only vague memories of their time in the train car, but he grew up knowing the story, knowing that his mother had been strong enough to fight powerful men and win. And Adelaide herself became an advocate for railway workers' safety. She worked with Judge Tavares and other reformers to push for better regulations, better oversight, better protection for workers. She gave speeches, testified before committees, and refused to let people forget what unchecked corporate greed could cost. Years later, when the railway through the Serra da Mantiqueira was finally completed, this time with proper safety standards and honest contractors, Adelaide was invited to the inauguration ceremony. As she stood watching the first official train pass through, she thought about Roberto, about how proud he would have been to see his dream realized the right way. "We did it," she whispered to his memory. "We built something good." That night, sitting on her porch with Francisco, now in his 80s but still sharp as ever, watching her children play in the yard, Adelaide reflected on how far they'd come. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if we hadn't found those documents?" she asked. Francisco was quiet for a moment. "I think about it sometimes," he admitted. "I think about how I lived with that secret for 3 years, too afraid to act on it. If you hadn't come along, if you hadn't been brave enough to demand justice for Roberto, those documents would still be rotting in that train car. Those directors would still be stealing and killing." He turned to look at her, his blue eyes still bright despite his age. "You saved a lot of lives, Adelaide. Not just your own, not just your children's. All the future workers who won't die because the regulations are better now. They owe their lives to you, even if they never know it." Adelaide shook her head. "We saved them. You and me together. One desperate widow and one forgotten old man who refused to let injustice win. A fine team, weren't we?" Francisco said with a smile. "The best," Adelaide agreed. As the sun set behind the mountains where they'd once hidden in an abandoned train car, where they'd been cold and hungry and afraid, Adelaide felt a profound sense of peace. She'd lost Roberto, and that wound would never fully heal. But she'd turned her grief into purpose, her desperation into action. She'd fought back, and she'd won. 20 years later, Adelaide Santos stood before a gathering of workers, politicians, and reformers at the dedication of the new Centro de Segurança Ferroviária, the railway safety center, in São Paulo. At 53, her black hair was now streaked with gray, and lines marked her face, but her green eyes were as bright and fierce as ever. 20 years ago, she began, her voice carrying clearly across the crowd. "I was a desperate widow with 3 children and nowhere to go. The railway company that employed my husband had let him die through their negligence, and then abandoned his family without a second thought. I could have accepted that. I could have disappeared into poverty and obscurity. Many women in my position did, and no one would have blamed them." She paused, looking out at the audience. She could see Tomas, now a successful lawyer, sitting in the front row with his wife and young daughter. Laura was there with her husband, a schoolteacher like herself, and their twin sons. Pedro, now a railway safety inspector, sat beside them. And in a place of honor sat Francisco Almeida, ancient and frail at nearly 100 years old, but still present, still witnessing the fruits of their courage. But I had help, Adelaide continued. I met a man who'd also been forgotten by the railway company, left for dead and erased. Together, we found evidence of a corruption so deep it had killed dozens of workers. And together we decided to fight back. She gestured to the building behind her, a modern structure that would house offices for railway safety inspectors, a training center for workers, and a memorial for those who died in railway accidents. This center exists because of everyone who refused to accept that workers' lives were disposable. It exists because of engineers like Carlos Mendez, who risked everything to expose the truth. It exists because of Judge Marcelo Tavares, who had the courage to take on powerful interests. And it exists because of all the families who came forward, who testified, who demanded justice. Adelaide's voice grew stronger. But most of all, it exists because we learned that desperate people are not powerless people. That a widow with 3 children and an old man living as a ghost can change the world if they refuse to give up. That justice, real justice, is worth fighting for even when the fight seems impossible. The applause was thunderous, but Adelaide barely heard it. She was thinking about that abandoned train car high in the mountains, about the cold nights and the hungry days, about the moment she'd opened that hidden compartment and realized that her husband's death could have meaning. After the ceremony, she walked with Francisco through the memorial garden. His steps were slow and careful now, and she held his arm to steady him. They stood together before a marble wall engraved with names. All the workers who died in railway accidents during those corrupt years. Roberto Santos's name was there, near the top. Do you think he'd be proud? Adelaide asked quietly. Francisco looked at the name, then at Adelaide, then at her 3 grown children and their families gathered nearby. Proud, he said. Adelaide, I think he'd be astounded. You took the worst moment of your life and turned it into a crusade for justice that saved countless lives. You raised 3 remarkable children who are all making the world better in their own ways. You never gave up, never accepted defeat, never stopped fighting. He squeezed her hand with his gnarled fingers. If Roberto could see what you've accomplished, he wouldn't just be proud. He'd be in awe. Adelaide felt tears slip down her cheeks. We did good work, didn't we, Francisco? The best work, he agreed. We saved lives. We brought justice. We proved that ordinary people, no matter how desperate their circumstances, can stand up to power and win. As the sun set over Sao Paulo, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Adelaide Santos stood with her family and her dearest friend, looking at the legacy they'd built from desperation and courage. The abandoned train car was long gone now, reclaimed by the mountain forest. But what had been found there, the evidence, the truth, the catalyst for change, had transformed the lives of thousands of workers and their families. One desperate widow had moved into that train car with nothing but her children and her will to survive. And she'd changed the world. So, what did you think of Adelaide's story? Could you have found the courage to fight back like she did, even when everything seemed hopeless? Leave your opinion in the comments. I read them all and love to know what you think. If you enjoyed this emotional story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any new videos. Every week there are incredible stories like this one waiting for you here. And look, get your heart ready, because the next video I'm going to recommend is even more surprising. Click on the screen now and continue this journey of stories that touch the soul. See you next time, and may God bless you all.